Hi guys, this is a follow-up to a previous video I did where I showed you how to get an email from ConvertBox into the Google Tag Manager data layer. Now I'm going to show you how to take that information as well as a bunch of other data, package that up and send that through to Facebook via the Pixel, the Conversion API, and also to Google Analytics. And this is going to improve your ads attribution and it's going to future-proof your tracking going forward. So at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to get the file, download the JSON file for this particular container, and how to install it on your projects. So let's get started. This is a website that I'm working on, and it has 2 or 3 main actions that I'm wanting to track. The first one is when somebody clicks on this button here, and the second one is when somebody fills out the booking form to schedule a call. So there's a couple of main ways that we can go about doing that. The first is to be able to identify what this button is, and there's a few ways to do that. So we could do it on the URL. So let's say that it's thriveengine.nz/book or schedule call. Let's say schedule call. Okay, so that's the URL that they're going to. So I could target that way, or I could give the button some kind of ID. Let's say that it's button and its ID equals, in this case, view content, to keep it in line with Facebook's standard conversion events. So I could do it that way. That would work as well. I'm going to select the URL method, so I'll show you how to do that in Google Tag Manager, and you'll see that there is a few dozen tags, triggers, and variables collectively. So there's quite a lot of information in here. I'll keep this video as brief as possible so that you don't get overwhelmed. But the first thing we need to do is to set up a trigger. And like I said, in this instance, what I'm wanting to do is to pick up on that URL. So the first thing we have to do is to go into variables and to make sure that you've configured some of these settings here. So if you click on configure, scroll down, you'll see that all of these options to do with clicks and to do with forms, they're all checked. Okay, so just make sure that yours are checked as well when you're doing this. It just gives you a bit of flexibility when it comes to setting up these triggers later on. So then we go to triggers, and now I want to point out something else here. When you are naming these different variables, triggers, and tags, it's really, really critical that you find some kind of standard way of notating what you're doing. So you'll notice in variables, as an example, this is a bit of a divergence from the actual topic of this video, but I think it's worth mentioning. CJS, that means custom JavaScript. You'll see in this box down here that these are all custom JavaScript variables, hence the CJS that prefixes each one of these variables here. Then you got DLV, which notes data layer variables. FB obviously is Facebook, GA is Google or Google Analytics. Okay, so going back to triggers, the way that I've got the events named, they're either events if there's some kind of standard event, or the custom event if there's some kind of custom event that I've created by pushing something into the data layer. So let's start with the simple case of setting up a view content event. What I'm looking for here is a trigger type of just links. So if I click on that, you'll see that there's all these options here. What I'm looking here for is just links. If I'm looking for a button click or a link click, that will do just fine. And in this case, you want to click on some links. And because I'm looking for the URL, I'm looking for click URL. So when somebody clicks something and the URL that it has in it contains this portion of the URL here. So if I go to my booking page, this is my booking page here. I gave you the wrong URL before. So I'm going to copy that into my notepad. And what I'm looking for is something that gives me a unique enough portion of the URL that I can be confident that that's going across to some kind of scheduled call event. Okay, so that's how I'm going to set this one up. I'm going to paste that in there. Now I'm going to save that, and that's already done, so I'm going to close that off. Now what I do then is go to tags and set up tag. This one's already been set up, but I will go in there, and this one says DLP view content. So the view content tells me that this is associated with this event, view content. And I've given it the prefix DLP to let me know that this is a data layer push. I'm pushing information, or I'm pushing data into the data layer. Now what the data layer is, it's like this layer of data that just Google Tag Manager can access and play with. And a number of applications have taken on this nomenclature now. So if you look at Google Analytics 4, they're also using the same nomenclature where you can push things into the data layer. So what I imagine is happening is that Google is starting to rationalize its different assets and getting them to play nicely together. But I think Segment also uses this naming convention as well. Anyway, so this is I'm calling this data layer push view content. So when the system sees a triggering event, view content, somebody's clicking on a button, it triggers this data layer push to happen. So what I'm going to be pushing into the data layer is an event with the name conversion, lowercase c in this case, and I'm pushing in a couple of variables as well. In this case, it's conversion.type, and the name, the type of conversion that I'm sending through is a view content conversion. Now, bearing in mind that I'm being careful here to name it similarly to what the standard Facebook events are. I want to make sure that Facebook gets this. Standard conversion events. Let's have a look there. Conversion events. And like if you're ever wondering what that is, just Google them and you'll see a list of standard conversion events here. And just you can see here in the brackets here, add to cart, that's how it's spelled, add to wish list, complete registry. So you can see that there's no space between the words, that they're capitalized, and there's no lowercase. It's capitalizing the first word in each of those words. Okay, so that's how it should look when you're putting this together. Conversion content, in this case I'm calling it schedule call, so that I can identify this from some other kind of view content event later on. Okay, so I've got that set up. Now what happens then? Well, it pushes data into the data layer, and what we've got then, so remember I've pushed into the data layer something called a conversion event, an event called conversion. Then what we do is we create another trigger. Now this is where it kind of sounds a little bit, oh my god, why is he creating this big hairball of a workflow? I will explain that in a moment, but just bear with me. There is some rationale for why I've done it this way. Hopefully I can explain it sufficiently that you understand why it is that we need to jump through all of these hoops to do this. Anyway, so we create a custom event called conversion, and so basically this is triggered when the system sees that there is an event called conversion. Okay, and so this fires this trigger. And now what we have is some standard Facebook tags that fire and pick up on that information, take those inputs, package it all up through some kind of automatic scripting that we put together in JavaScript, create the payload and send that off. All right, so this is why I've created this extra complexity, or this extra steps, these extra steps of complexity, because I wanted this container to be able to pick up when there was a conversion event, and it had to be flexible enough to pick up on a view content event, a registration event, a purchase event, whatever kind of event that you wanted, including some kind of custom event. Be able to take those as inputs, be able to take the parameters that go with that conversion event, such as price, currency, whatever, you know, and then send those through to Facebook. And that's why there's this extra level of complexity there. It's unfortunate, but I had to give it a bit of thought in terms of how to do this, and this is what I came up with. Okay, so when the system, now let's go into one of these. So this is called, you've got two tags that fire off when the system sees a custom event that has a conversion event attached to it, right? So you got this one here, which is FB Cappy page view. And like I said, CAPI is an acronym for Facebook Conversion API. And this helps with things like cookie blockers and browser ad blockers and that type of thing, and tracker blockers. This helps with that in the first instance, but it also helps to capture some of the data that's being lost through the Facebook pixel, right? So we have two tags being fired off at the same time. We've got the standard Facebook pixel. This is FBQ. So FBQ stands for the Facebook pixel. I don't actually know what FBQ means, but that's, FBQ is the naming convention that Facebook has been using for years now when triggering pixel events. Anyway, so if I open up the FBQ event, what we're doing is we are sending through a bunch of data. First of all, we're saying, does the price exist? If it doesn't exist, if we haven't captured that value, then just make it empty. Same thing with the currency, same thing with the content, same thing with the category. And then we generate a Facebook event ID. And what we do is we pick up, if it's available, if we have the Facebook click ID available, we attach that at the front of this unique identifier. We also timestamp when somebody visits based on when the container loads. And we also look at the conversion type, whether that's a view content, a purchase, a registration, whatever. So that's all truncated together in one variable. And then what we do is we create a payload, right? So then we go, okay, so we've got the standard pixel notation that you probably have seen on a number of different Facebook pixel installations. At least this line, some of these variables maybe not, but at least this FBQ track and comma, and then we put in the conversion type. So it would normally say view content or say page view. It will at least say that. And then we've got our payload. This is this variable that we've built here. And then we have this event ID that we've built up here. I've already explained how that works. So that's how the pixel payload is built for an event. For Cappy, the way that it's built is we send through the same kind of data, but it goes through to a payload helper. All right, so we send through the event, and that gets picked up. Just give it a moment to load in this thing called the payload helper. Similar kind of logic there. There's a few other bits and pieces like the IP address. So the scripting in this container sets the IP address, puts it in a cookie, then fetches it and stores it here in the script. So it gets the IP address, the client user agent, the click ID, the action source, event ID, all of that, and it creates similar to what I've shown you before, but a few extra pieces in terms of the IP address, etc. Because it doesn't have that information, you have to manually go and figure that out yourself, which we've done with the scripting in this container. Once again, you create a payload, and then the system then hands it on to this thing called the Cappy send post request. So it takes all of that data, and you can see all of this JavaScript here. It sends it off to Facebook using your Facebook access token. I won't show you mine here, but where you get this from is if you go into Events Manager, you click on Implementations, and if you scroll down, you'll see that there's a section where you can generate that that access token, right? So you grab that and then you put it in here. You click it and you put it in the area where there's an input box. Like I said, I'm not going to open that up right now because I don't want to show everybody my access token. Okay, so same thing with your pixel ID. You grab your pixel ID from Facebook and you put it in this input box here. Your Google Analytics. Now this Google Analytics implementation is Universal Analytics. I originally set it up with Google Analytics 4, but I just felt that maybe 95% of people who are watching this at this stage are probably still going to be using Google Analytics. So just chuck in your Google Analytics ID there, and any settings that you have, put them here as well for your Google Analytics settings. Okay, so back to the tags. So this is how the a page event works. Not a page event, sorry, an event in general. So if you, it doesn't really matter what kind of event you set up. What really matters is that you're somehow able to select that in terms of something that's happening on your website or on your application. And I showed you how I did that with the URL, but you could also do the same thing, as I said before, by selecting the ID. So I'll show you an example of how you do that. So if I went into triggers, going back to my website here, if I click on schedule call, you can see that in the settings I've given it an ID of click-view content. So equally, I could set up something that would pick up on this ID of view content. The way you do that is that you'd go back into your triggers, go to your event, your view content, click on that, and instead of selecting by URL, you would now hover, scroll down to choose inbuilt variables, and you'd go for click ID, right? And then in that box now I would have this, I think it was it click view content. All right, so now it would be that instead, click dash view content. If I save that, now it would be searching for that instead. Okay, so one more example with, in this case, just going to discard those changes. Another trigger is when somebody hits a page. So let's say that you want to fire off a conversion event when somebody schedules a call, or let's say that they've purchased the product or they've opted into your lead magnet. They've ended up on a success page and they're showing a message. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to follow through on my one. So I'll do this. So if somebody goes to this page here, they click on this schedule call button, they'll end up on this page here. I'm tracking them coming to this page by this URL in the button click on this page. So once they get here, they can fill out the details of when they want to book a call, and then email address. Okay, I'm going to click book me. Okay, so we've talked about the events. Now the actual basic pixel page view, so when the page first loads, as usual, it will try and fire off the Facebook pixel. Same thing with Google Analytics. They'll both try and load at the very beginning. And you need that to happen because you need the Facebook browser pixel library to load in order to be able to do the other things, like extracting the information that the Facebook pixel does, so it can automatically send that back to Facebook, to the Facebook ads platform. But what you'll notice in here is we're picking up, if it's picking up on your Facebook pixel ID from that variable section that I've shown you earlier. So you go through, you update the Google Analytics ID, your Facebook pixel ID, your Facebook CAPI token that you should generate. I can do a separate video on that if people don't know how to do that. And you need to fill that all in because these scripts are pulling that all through here. Once again, you've got this event ID that's built off the Facebook click ID with the timestamp, with the event type. In this case, it's going to be page view, so I haven't changed that. Joins it all together and sends that through to Facebook. And the same thing happens with the CAPI page view. So we've got Facebook CAPI the Facebook CAPI page view getting sent through the same way as we are doing with a conversion event. And then what happens is in your events manager under the test events, you will start seeing data like this, right? So you'll say for a view content event, you'll see that it'll come through on the pixel, and that's you'll know that because it says browser in this column here. You'll see the event ID, and you can see here it says, if you look closely and zoom in, you'll see that it says undefined underscore, some kind of long number with another underscore with the conversion event, which in this case is view content, right? So that's the format that these unique event IDs are coming through to Facebook. And you'll see that this exact same one is here, undefined underscore some number that's ending in 28. This one ends in 28. Event type is view content. This one here is view content. So that's how Facebook is deduplicating the data. It's getting a signal on the front end, it's getting the signal on the back end, and it's deduplicating them when it sees that unique identifier. Now it's able to tie them together, and any missing data that either one of them has, it joins these two events together and then throws away the redundant information, right? So that's why you're seeing here that it's that it says it's been deduplicated. All right, so you'll start seeing that come through when you set this up properly. And what it will do now is help you to get some of that data that you're probably starting to miss. You might have been missing this already, but now you'll start picking up more of that data, even with the iOS changes and things that are going to be rolled out very shortly. Okay, so that's how the page view works. That's how the Facebook events work. That's how the Google Analytics works. So all of that works together, working with much the same data. Just a quick explanation about the variables, at least the ones that you should be most concerned with. Like I said, make sure you fill out the Google Analytics settings. You'll see that I've got my Universal Analytics number in there. Your test code. So when you're testing in the Events Manager and you don't see this data, it's the first thing you need to do. For some reason, oh, there we go. Is you need to clear this activity, right? So when you're testing for the first time, go to the Events Manager section in your Facebook Ads account. Click on the Test Events tab that you can see here. Clear any activity that you see in there. And then what you'll see is for testing server events in this section here, you'll see that there's a number. Now, when you click on that, it'll copy this number. You can see that there was a little success message there that said that that text had been copied into my clipboard. So you go back to Tag Manager and you paste that number in here. And what that will do then is, now that the scripting in this container will detect that that test number is there, and because of that, it will now start attempting to send the data through to Facebook for testing purposes. Now, it's really, really important that once you've finished testing, that you turn that off again. If you don't, you'll be missing out on data, because some of that data won't be pushed through to Facebook, because Facebook thinks it's test data, right? So just make sure that once you're finished here with the test event code, that to turn it off again, you type the word null in there, all lowercase letters, and save it, right? So now you're not testing anymore, and you won't see any of these test events show up here. Now, here are the variables that I was talking about. This is the data layer conversion category, the content, the currency, the price, the type. If you open these up, it's basically looking for these variables in dot notation. So it says conversion with a dot with category, okay? And where that's getting set, I've already shown you where that gets set. It's set in the triggers, in the tags. It gets very complicated. Anyway, so it was set here. So in this DLP, this data layer push, it's creating this event, this conversion event, and sending through these parameters with these values as well. Alrighty. So in order to get this going on your project, what you need to do is go to the admin section of your container that you've created, and then you'll see this section here. Now, what you're looking for is import container. So you click on that, and There it is there. So it'll look like this: GTM KL something or other workspace, but basically it'll have this .json file name, right? So then you open that, and then what you choose is you say choose workspace. You can either import this into a brand new container and give it a new name, or you can import it into an existing one. Okay, so I'm going to call this, for now I'm just going to call it test delete me, because that's what I'm going to be doing. Let's save that. And now it's going to ask me, you know, what do I want to import? Do I want to import the tags, the triggers? And I'm just going to say, yep, install the whole lot. And you can see here at the moment, it's only showing the tag. So there's an issue with the way I exported it, but I'll make sure that when you have this file, it will have all of the tags, triggers, and variables there. And then all you do is click on confirm, and it will then import those into your container. So hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming, and that you found it useful. And now if you have any questions about this, about Google Tag Manager, and about some of the JavaScript that's contained in this container, then just ask them in the comments, especially if they're going to help other people. And if you want to talk to me directly about doing this for your own project, about setting things up and doing it properly, then you can contact me via Messenger. Talk soon.